Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
Mastering the art of dissolving the self-image begins with understanding that the persona you defend so fiercely is not you. It is a costume stitched together from memories, labels, and the projections of others. From the moment you were born, fragments of identity were handed to you like scraps of fabric. You took them, sewed them together, and called it me. Yet beneath that costume sits a consciousness untouched by praise or insult, a force that simply is. The first step in dissolving the false self is to see it clearly. When you realize that most of what you call I is a performance created to survive, you begin to detach. This detachment is not weakness, it is power. For once you stop clinging to the mask loses its control over you. What emerges is not emptiness, but raw presence. This practice is not a gentle meditation. It feels like stripping away skin. The self-image fights for survival, whispering lies to keep you from dismantling it. I am my achievements. It says, I am my failures. It says, I am what they think of me. But you are not those things. You are the awareness behind them. The process of dissolving the false self is painful because it feels like death. In a sense, it is. It is the death of the puppet strings that have guided your reactions, the death of your addiction to validation, the death of your fear of being nothing. But on the other side of that death is freedom so profound that it cannot be shaken by external noise. What makes this transformation so powerful is that it breaks the chains of control. As long as you identify with the persona, you are vulnerable to manipulation. Praise lifts you. Criticism crushes you. Comparison drains you. You become reactive rather than sovereign. By dissolving the persona, you step outside of that cycle. Praise no longer intoxicates. Criticism no longer poisons. You stop being a puppet of public opinion and become a force immune to it. This does not make you apathetic. It makes you unshakable. You can move through the world with clarity, acting from alignment rather than fear. Releasing the false self also transforms your relationship with ambition. Most goals you chase are attempts to reinforce identity. You want success not for the thing itself, but for what it says about you. You want applause not for the sound, but for the story it tells about your worth. When you let go of the false self, these cravings dissolve. You no longer build to impress, you build to express. You no longer chase outcomes to feel valid. You create because creation itself calls you. Paradoxically, this detachment often leads to greater achievement because your actions are no longer clogged with desperation. They flow with clean intent. This dissolution also changes how you perceive failure. When the self-image dies, failure loses its sting. It is no longer a threat to who you are, because who you are is no longer tied to outcomes. Mistakes become data. Setbacks become teachers. Instead of shrinking under shame, you adapt without hesitation. This is the hidden advantage of those who transcend identity. They move faster because they no longer waste energy protecting an image. They are not afraid to look foolish. They are not afraid to start over. In that fearlessness lies their edge. It is important to understand that dissolving the self-image does not make you passive. It does not turn you into a ghost floating above life. It roots you deeper into reality. Without the mask, you see the world as it is rather than as your persona interprets it. You stop living in mental simulations and start living in direct experience. Conversations become richer because you are not performing. Work becomes deeper because you are not proving. Relationships become cleaner because you are not manipulating. This groundedness feels like power because it is power, the power of presence without pretense. The process also reveals how much of your suffering was self-inflicted. Most of your pain came from defending the false self, fearing its collapse, feeding its endless hunger. Without it, life's difficulties remain, but the suffering attached to them shrinks. You stop turning every challenge into a referendum on your worth. You stop turning every loss into a personal tragedy. You begin to respond to life instead of reacting to it. This does not remove pain, but it removes the poison you added to it. You discover that freedom is not the absence of difficulty, but the absence of unnecessary drama. As you continue, you begin to feel a paradoxical lightness. You act without clinging. You give without expecting. You create without needing applause. This does not make you detached from humanity. It makes you more compassionate. Without the burden of defending a self-image, you have more capacity to see others clearly. You are no longer locked in competition with shadows. You are no longer obsessed with proving your worth. That space allows genuine connection, genuine service, genuine leadership. The absence of ego makes you larger, not smaller. What emerges at the end of this process is not a void, but a self built on truth. You still have preferences, goals, and identity, but you wear them lightly. You can put them on or take them off without fear. They become tools rather than prisons. You act in the world, but you are no longer bound by the story of who you are supposed to be. This is the freedom that cannot be bought, cannot be faked, cannot be taken. It is the power of being grounded in something deeper than narrative. Certainty is the most seductive prison. The mind craves order, so it convinces you that what you already believe is truth. It filters the world through confirmation bias, showing you only what validates your assumptions and discarding what challenges them. You scroll, you listen, you converse, and what returns to you is an echo of yourself. This feels safe, it feels stabilizing, but it is blindness disguised as clarity. To break free from this cage, you must learn to question your own certainty. You must hunt down the areas where you might be wrong, where your vision is blurred, where your conclusions are premature. Killing the ego is not about silencing others. It begins with silencing the comfort of your own illusions. The act of questioning certainty requires courage most never develop. It feels like betrayal to confront your own cherished beliefs. You invested time, identity, and reputation into them. To admit you might have been wrong feels like self-destruction. That is why most people would rather double down than re-examine. They would rather defend the illusion than admit the cracks. But to practice self-honesty at this level is the truest act of liberation. The more you confront your blind spots, the less control they have over you. When you expose them willingly, you rob them of their ability to sabotage you. This is how you break the cycle of confirmation bias and step closer to reality. Every blind spot you uncover feels like tearing skin because it requires you to admit you are not the master of your own mind. But that is the point. Growth begins at the moment you shatter the illusion of complete knowledge. Think of every breakthrough in history. It did not come from certainty. It came from someone willing to question what everyone else assumed. The scientist challenges the consensus. The philosopher questions morality. The leader rethinks strategy. Progress requires someone willing to say, "Maybe I am wrong." That humility births revolutions. Without it, you remain another defender of an outdated script. Confirmation bias is not just intellectual, it is emotional. You filter not only facts but feelings. You ignore signals that contradict your self-image. You deny evidence that threatens your identity. A toxic relationship feels justified because you cling to the belief that love requires endurance. A failing habit feels logical because you convince yourself it will pay off eventually. Every piece of information that might shatter those illusions gets pushed aside. To hunt your blind spots, you must become ruthless with yourself. You must ask the uncomfortable questions that pierce your self-deceptions. You must be willing to see the evidence you have avoided. That willingness is the beginning of transformation. Killing ego is not grand spectacle. It is the quiet work of dismantling false certainty. It is the discipline of questioning not only others but yourself. You examine your beliefs the way a sculptor examines stone, chipping away at excess until only truth remains. This is painful because it leaves you exposed. Certainty feels like armor, but it is paper thin. Doubt feels like nakedness, but it allows you to rebuild with stronger materials. When you master this, you become resilient. Attacks no longer shake you because you already dismantled yourself before the world could. The irony is that questioning certainty does not make you weaker. It makes you more stable. When you know your blind spots, you are harder to manipulate. When you admit the limits of your knowledge, you can learn endlessly. When you confront your illusions, you stop being controlled by them. This process humbles you but also empowers you. You begin to see reality more clearly than those clinging to their illusions. You become adaptable where others are rigid, and adaptability is survival. Certainty collapses under pressure, flexibility endures. Blind spots exist in every human because the brain is not designed for truth. It is designed for survival. It evolved to reduce discomfort, not to seek accuracy. That means your default setting is distortion. If you accept this, you realize the importance of self-examination. Without it, you are not living in reality. You are living in a curated hallucination shaped by bias. To kill ego is to fight against that default. It is to choose discomfort over illusion, to choose truth over validation, to choose clarity over comfort. This choice must be made daily. The deeper you go into questioning your certainty, the more peace you discover. At first, it feels destabilizing to admit you are wrong, but over time it feels liberating. You no longer need to defend every opinion. You no longer need to win every argument. You can let go because your identity is not tied to being right. You are not enslaved to the persona of the one who knows. You are free to evolve, free to grow, free to change. That flexibility is what makes you unstoppable. Because when others are trapped in defending illusions, you are moving forward unchained. The hunt for blind spots is endless, but that is the beauty. You never arrive at complete truth, but you keep refining closer to it. You trade arrogance for curiosity. You trade rigidity for adaptability. Each time you confront another bias, you sharpen yourself. You chip away at the falsehoods that weaken you. Over time, what remains is lean, precise, and unshakable. This is not the death of the self, but the refinement of it. It is the forging of a mind that cannot be bent by illusions. Most people never question the origin of their ambitions. They set goals because culture told them to. They pursue careers because comparison demanded it. They chase possessions because they think they will silence old insecurities. Many ambitions are not true desires but defense mechanisms dressed as dreams. You want wealth not for freedom, but because you are terrified of appearing insignificant. You want fame not for expression, but because you want revenge against being ignored. You want perfection not for excellence, but because you cannot tolerate your own flaws. When you dissect your goals, you begin to see these motives clearly, and clarity often feels brutal because it shows you how much of your life has been steered not by vision, but by fear. To dissect a goal is to cut it open and strip it of illusion. Ask yourself what would remain if no one ever knew you achieved it. Would you still want the house if it came with no recognition? Would you still crave the promotion if it carried no title? Would you still chase the spotlight if the world never applauded? These questions slice through ego and reveal truth. If the answer is no, the goal was never real. It was a mask, a shield, a way of protecting yourself from shame. Real goals are immune to invisibility. They are worth pursuing even in silence, even without validation, even without recognition. That is how you know they belong to you and not to the illusions of society. The hardest part of this dissection is realizing how much of your ambition is borrowed. Parents hand you their unfinished dreams. Teachers hand you cultural scripts. Peers hand you comparisons wrapped as competition. You collect these fragments and wear them as your own, but they weigh you down because they were never designed for you. You suffer not because you failed, but because you pursued someone else's definition of success. When you dissect your goals, you begin to cut these borrowed ambitions away. It is painful, because each cut feels like betrayal. Yet what you betray is not truth, but illusion. And once illusion is gone, you feel the lightness of freedom. Defense mechanisms are tricky because they hide behind noble masks. You say you want power to create change, but secretly you crave control because you once felt powerless. You say you want to inspire, but secretly you crave attention because you once felt invisible. You say you want to achieve greatness, but secretly you crave validation because you once felt unworthy. None of these motives are shameful, but they are fragile. They crumble when tested. If your ambition relies on applause, it will collapse in silence. If it relies on recognition, it will collapse in obscurity. The only ambition that survives is the one that burns without witnesses. That is what dissection reveals. Once you strip a goal down to its core, you see whether it is truly yours or just a projection. This process hurts because it requires honesty most avoid. You may realize that decades of your pursuit were fueled by the need to impress. You may realize that sacrifices you made were for goals you never actually wanted. This pain is necessary. It is the death of false ambition, and in its death, something more authentic rises. You can rebuild goals from the ground up, not to protect wounds, but to express truth. That is how you shift from defense to creation. Dissecting goals also reveals the difference between achievement and fulfillment. Achievement is external, measurable, visible. Fulfillment is internal, quiet, steady. Many chase achievement thinking it will deliver fulfillment, only to find the emptiness remains. This is because their goals were built to impress rather than to align. When you dissect, you separate what looks valuable from what feels valuable. You realize that the applause fades, but the work that feeds your soul endures. You stop chasing what sparkles in public and start building what glows in private. That shift changes everything. The discipline of dissection requires brutal honesty. You must be willing to sit with discomfort and admit when your motives are hollow. You must be willing to peel back layers until only the raw desire remains. This honesty is terrifying, but it is also cleansing. Once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. You can no longer fool yourself into chasing illusions. You are forced to confront the question, what do I actually want if no one ever watches? That question is the scalpel that cuts away ego and leaves only authenticity. When you begin living by dissected goals, your energy transforms. You are no longer drained by pursuits that do not belong to you. You are no longer restless in victories that feel empty. You are no longer anxious about the opinions of those who never mattered. Instead, your energy sharpens. Your focus narrows. You endure setbacks because your ambition is not built on defense. It is built on truth. No applause is needed. No recognition is required. You are fueled by something deeper than validation. This process also changes how you see others. You begin to notice the illusions driving them. You see the masks, the borrowed ambitions, the defense mechanisms disguised as vision. Instead of envying them, you feel clarity. You realize most are trapped, chasing applause they will never enjoy. You realize few ever dissect their goals, and that is why few ever find fulfillment. This clarity sharpens your path. You stop comparing because you know you are not even playing the same game. You are not chasing illusions. You are pursuing what remains when illusions burn away. To live as a verb is to abandon the illusion that you are a finished object. A noun is fixed, boxed, and labeled, but a verb is alive, unfolding, never fully complete. Most people cling to nouns. They say, I am this, or I am that. They tie their worth to titles, identities, and labels because it gives them the illusion of stability. But in doing so, they build walls around themselves. They trap their potential inside rigid definitions. Living as a verb demands that you refuse such cages. It demands that you see yourself as continuous movement, evolving through every decision, reshaping with every action. This is where ego death becomes liberation. You are not disappearing. You are dissolving the walls that prevent you from becoming more. The process of living as a verb terrifies those who cling to identity. They fear the uncertainty of not having a fixed definition. They want permanence, even if permanence suffocates them. Yet permanence is illusion. Everything in nature moves, shifts, transforms. Rivers carve valleys, mountains erode, stars collapse and are reborn. Why should you be any different? To cling to noun like existence is to fight against the flow of reality itself. To embrace verb like living is to align with life's rhythm. You are not here to be a statue. You are here to be a current. To move without walls is to admit that becoming matters more than being. That realization cracks ego's grip because ego thrives on labels and dies in the face of transformation. Living as a verb means redefining growth as a continuous state, not a destination. When you cling to nouns, you are always chasing a finish line. You say, once I am successful, I will be whole, or once I am respected, I will be complete. But verbs have no finish line. They stretch into infinity. You do not reach success, you succeed daily. You do not reach growth, you grow endlessly. This is why verbs carry power. They protect you from the stagnation of thinking you have arrived. They force you to remain in motion. The ego hates this because it craves the safety of arrival. But safety is a graveyard. Movement is life. When you live as a verb, failure shifts its meaning. Failure no longer defines you because you are not a noun tied to outcomes. If you fail, it does not mean you are a failure. It means you are failing in motion, and failing is part of becoming. That difference shatters ego's narrative. Ego wants to define you by single events, to freeze you into categories of success or failure. But verbs cannot be frozen. They cannot be reduced to one outcome. To live as a verb is to strip failure of its power to define you. You remain in motion, and motion is immune to judgment. Living as a verb also transforms your relationships. Most people present themselves as nouns, clinging to roles and identities to impress others. They say, I am powerful, or I am important. But when you abandon those labels, you become fluid. You no longer need to prove. You no longer need to defend titles. You can simply act, adjust, respond. People feel this difference. They sense the absence of walls and it unsettles them. They cannot pin you down, cannot categorize you, cannot control you. You move too freely. This is why fluidity frightens others. It exposes their rigidity. To live as a verb is to live untouchable. Another gift of living as a verb is presence. Nouns are obsessed with permanence. They pull you into the future, demanding you protect identity. They drag you into the past, reminding you of labels you must maintain. Verbs exist only in the moment. They are alive only when practiced. You cannot succeed yesterday or tomorrow. You succeed now. You cannot love yesterday or tomorrow. You love now. Verbs demand presence. They force you to engage fully with each moment because without the moment, they do not exist. Living this way kills ego's obsession with time. It dissolves the anxiety of the future and the chains of the past. You move as life moves, here and now. To live as a verb is also to embrace fluid reinvention. Nouns resist change because change threatens their definition. But verbs thrive on change. They gain strength through adaptation. This is why those who live as verbs endure crisis, while those who live as nouns collapse. The one who says, "I am successful," falls apart when failure arrives. The one who says, "I succeed daily," keeps moving through failure. The one who says, "I am wise," is destroyed by ignorance. The one who says, "I learn," thrives through ignorance. Verbs never collapse because they are built on becoming. That resilience is the true freedom of ego death. Ego thrives on walls, on definitions, on categories. It wants you to believe you are a fixed story because fixed stories are easy to defend. But when you dismantle those walls and live as a verb, you strip ego of its foundation. It cannot control you because you cannot be defined. You are no longer chained to one role, one outcome, one identity. You are free to become whatever the moment demands. That freedom is terrifying to those who worship nouns, but it is intoxicating to those who crave truth. To live without walls is to live aligned with the infinite. Living as a verb also alters how you view legacy. Most chase legacy as a noun, something permanent etched in stone. But stones erode, names fade, monuments collapse. The true legacy of a verb is movement that echoes. It is actions that ripple through time,